Hey everybody, it's Richard Harris and Scott Leese with another episode of the Surf and Sales podcast. Super excited for this guest because she stuck with us after we rescheduled on her 4 times, and so she deserves all the credit for sticking with us. I'd like to introduce Cheryl Castleman, who is the Chief Learning Officer at Sisters for Sales, which we'll dive into, and also the Managing Partner at CGI Executive Coaching. And I don't want to talk, I certainly want to talk about executive coaching. And then she actually just had a great book come out in the last couple of weeks called What's in the Cards, 5 Post-Pandemic Sales Strategies. Is that right, Cherilynn?
Absolutely, that's right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And obviously, we need to give it a quick shout out to our sponsors of Salesforce Revenue Cloud, Lead 411, and Gong.io. But I want to dig in. Well, Cherilynn, where do you want to dig in? You've got so much you can talk about. Let's. What do you want to talk about?
So let's talk about Sisters in Sales.
Okay, let's start
I think
there.
that's how we got connected. You
Yep.
guys reached out to me, and Sisters in Sales is an organization that is committed to helping women of color in the sales sector advance their careers, get too good to be ignored, and most importantly, find a community. So many women in sales, especially women of color, are the only one. And so Sisters in Sales is about finding that community and creating a community and helping each other advance. And so I don't know if any of your listeners are women of color or they have any women on their team that are women of color, but I would encourage them to check us out at www.sisters.com.
So let's dive in there a little bit too, because look, I've grown up in sales. There were definitely not a lot of people of color in sales. Certainly not a lot of women as from people of color. Was it? I mean, why is that? Is sales not being taught as a career option? Is it the systemic bias or unintentional bias of racism from white males who typically, until recently, have been a lot of the leaders? Like, where do you think it's coming from?
So I think that most managers hire people that they're comfortable with. And so I don't know if you're familiar with Angelique Slagle as an example. Angelique started out as an admin at IBM over 20 years ago. Today, she manages over $690 million in revenue. She has over 160 million users, and she is head of SAP SuccessFactors. And so I share that to say, Angelique is also the mother of 5 children. Angelique is not going to go have a beer with you at 5 o'clock on a Friday. And so a lot of sales professionals or sales leaders are men. And we used to hire somebody that was a good fit. Well, what if she's not a good fit? What happens if she's just an incredible salesperson? And so I think that's part of it. It's just, they were just never given the opportunity. They were never hired. I know that my very first sales job that I applied for, I was told, no, we don't think so. And that was in financial services. I went on, worked for another company, was top of the leaderboard, outsold everybody. It ended up becoming a GM, and my general agency was one of the top ones. So I think it's just people have to get a new definition about what fit is.
Yeah. What attracted you to sales? Like, were you always, the girl doing Girl Scout cookies, or were you always sort of organizing stuff in the neighborhood for kids? Like, what was your background there?
I was the girl doing the Girl Scout cookies. My mom was a Girl Scout leader, and I was in kindergarten at the time. And at the time, you weren't allowed to be in Girl Scouts. And I started selling Girl Scout cookies when they were less than $1 a box. And I loved it. I loved going door to door. I loved selling, and I started doing that. I also grew up in a home with 2 parents, and my father had his own general contracting business. And I still remember what it was like to connect with his clients and how he taught me the good enough isn't principle. And so when I tell the story, I still remember that my dad we had installed this bedroom in somebody's attic, and he put in a high-end bathroom with the double showers and the big sunken jacuzzi tub. And he went to run water in the tub. And I was standing in the kitchen with the owner, and the ceiling started to crack. And I still remember that we spent all of our profits and revenue from the next month, making that right. We had to reconfigure the room, get it over the, the retaining wall. But what I learned from my father was about excellence, and good enough isn't. And I think that's what I brought into sales, and that's what's helped me succeed.
So were you actually out there like, plastering and, putting up drywall, or were you just sort of?
Yes, I can wire an entire house. I can do plumbing. I can tile bathrooms. I can lay carpet. I paint. I can do it all. And
I can't do.
I feel
I
so
can't do-
inadequate.
I can't do a single one of those things.
Me
Not
either.
one.
well, I don't do them today, but I will stand there and watch you, and I will say, okay, that's not what we're doing. And so I do watch. I don't do it, but I did learn how to do it. And I think so. That's where that's where I learned about sales, and I've been in sales my entire life.
So is Sisters in Sales, is it a Slack community? Do you have virtual events? Like, tell everybody, what goes on and why it's so helpful in the impact that you all are having.
So Sisters in Sales, we do three things. So first of all, we do coaching and training. So I do master classes. We do a virtual event every single month. We just had one last Friday that was sponsored by Experian. We have one coming up. We're looking at the trucking industry and non-traditional or 21st century industries for women, which will be the last Thursday of March. So we have virtual events. We also have a Slack community, but we also partner with companies that want to fill their pipeline with women of color in sales. So we partner with them. And for example, one of my clients, I have a cohort with T-Mobile where they've given me 6 women to coach and train for 6 months so that they can move them into leadership roles. So whether it's attracting women, I also write blogs for companies to help them see women who are succeeding in these companies. We do fireside chat, and we also do a huge summit once a year. In September, we had 1,400 women of color on a virtual platform for 2 days talking about advancing their careers, learning about other people. And so we do a summit every year also.
What are we not getting? What are you leaders, you mentioned it earlier in terms of, hiring people they're comfortable with, those kinds of things. What are we missing? And I think I'm hoping it's similar to all gender and races and those things, but is there something we're missing out on? Maybe that's a better question, by not bringing in more diversity, aside from the obvious.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is not only, let's take it a little broader. If you look at Harvard Business Review did a study called "Women Are the Future of B2B Sales." It came out in May of 2020, and what they talked about is why women succeeded coming out of the financial crisis in 2008. Why women are going to be successful in sales in coming post-pandemic, and that's just kind of what led me to write this book. Is, people laugh and they say to me, Cherilynn, well, are you saying men have to sell like a woman to succeed? And I'm saying, well, if you look at the statistics, yes, probably. Women are more empathetic. Women of color have had to be almost chameleon-like. They've had to be more versatile. They've had to be more collaborative. They've had to be strategic and think analytically. And so I think we've built skills, and I think that sales leaders and managers have to just be more comfortable hiring somebody who can do the job versus worrying about, are they going to be a good fit? Am I going to want to go golfing with them? No, you're not going to go golfing with them. I had a fireside chat with the #1 salesperson for client partner at Twitter. And she showed up at the fireside chat with her hat like Scott, hat on backwards. And her name tag says badass, okay? And I had to chuckle because I thought, how many guys want to hire a badass woman?
Yeah.
You might, but some people might be a little, intimidated her. And she was so amazing. And she upsells and cross sells more than anyone else. She doesn't look like you. She might make you a little uncomfortable. And so I encourage people, step outside your comfort zone. And let your HR team do their job. HR teams, and they tell me all the time, women and women of color do well on the assessment test. They interview well, and they put them in front of a hiring manager, and he goes, not a good fit for the team. Well, Get out of that. I challenge you. And when I say that, and that's what my book is about, I had the opportunity to have dinner with William Green, the former CEO of Accenture. And what Bill said to me is, Cherilynn, if you criticize people, you raise their defensiveness. If you challenge people, you raise their game. And so I'm going to challenge every single sales manager out there listening to this podcast. Hire somebody that doesn't look like you. Hire somebody that looks good on paper, that has a great track record, and forget about whether or not they're a good fit.
Yeah. Well, I want to know more about your book. You've mentioned it and alluded to it a couple of times now. Very specifically, I want to know what the 5 post-pandemic strategies are. This is like killing me. And I only just realized that this book came out. So obviously I have not had a chance to read it. What are the 5 strategies?
Okay, so the 5 strategies are, the name of the book is What's in the Cards, CARDS. C stands for collaboration, and these are the skills that are needed to be post-pandemic. So the first one is collaboration, the next one is analytical, the next one is relationships, the D stands for development, and S stands for being strategic. And throughout the book, I talk about several tips and techniques on how to connect with clients, how to be more collaborative, how to be analytical, how to build relationships, how to be open-minded, and how to be strategic. For example, one of the things I talk about is, like I said, I used to teach financial fluency. And I'm sure Scott and Richard, you guys can remember back in March of 2020, that pivotal moment for you when you thought, wow, things are different. I was getting ready to teach a live class on financial fluency. And I paused and I said, what if instead of selling, we solutioned? And what if, as we start reimagining and reinventing, we recommitted to connecting with clients? And I don't know about you, but I was taught to sell where we spent 20% of our time on the client relationship and then we spent 80% of our time selling. What if, coming out of the pandemic, we flipped that and we spent 80% of our time building that client relationship and then 20% of our time solutioning? And the reason why I say that is, think about everybody you've talked to since this pandemic has started. Every single adult has been impacted by this. So everything we know about our clients and consumer behavior has changed. So we have to change. And that's what I do in the book, is I challenge people to change.
So when you say sell more collaboratively, I'm going to try to pick apart these 5 strategies kind of one by one, get a little bit more detail out of you. When you say sell more collaboratively, do you mean that in the sense of like with the prospect, there's more collaboration? Do you mean internally, like Scott and Cheryl and Richard all work together in different functions and we're collaborating to go out and sell? Do you mean collaboratively in the sense of like, I work here at scott.com and Richard works at richard.com and we're both trying to sell into the same account, so we're collaboratively trying to break into the account together? What exactly do you mean when you talk about collaborative
and
selling?
I'm going to say yes. Okay.
To all of the above.
Yes to all of those. Okay. And the reason why is, one of the things that has happened is, you're sitting, I don't know where you are, Scott, where are you based?
I'm in Austin, Texas right now.
You're in Austin. I'm in DC. Richard, where are you?
I'm in the Bay Area, San Francisco.
You're in the Bay Area. Okay, San Francisco. So if we are not being more collaborative with our partners, collaborative with our clients, collaborative with our subject matter experts internally, we are not building relationships and connecting, we can't sell. People have been battered, people have been bruised, people are hurting. And so if we don't connect, then how do you sell? And so whether it's connecting with your peers, whether it's bringing somebody along because you haven't connected with a client, whether it's taking the time to truly connect with a client. And one of the ways that I talk about doing that is just listening. And so when I say collaborating with a client, it is pausing and really being present in and listening. And when I talk about that, for example, I talk about level 1 listening, which is what I call restaurant listening. This is when you go to a restaurant and they say to you, Richard, do you want steak or salmon? And in your head, you're going, well, I had steak yesterday. I don't know if I want salmon. That's restaurant listening. You don't care about what they're saying so much. It's about you. Level 2 listening is what we were all taught in sales school, and that's reflective listening. And it's when you say, oh, okay, I hear that you're sad, or I see that you're sad, or you're reflecting back what they said. or you're struggling with this issue. And the third level of listening, which is empathetic listening, is not the way that I was trained. And I don't know, Scott, were you trained in the feel, felt, found method?
Nope. Nope.
Okay, so when I was trained,
I trained myself.
okay, so I don't know, Richard's laughing. He may know about the feel, felt, found method. When I was trained, empathy meant I know how you feel. I have felt the same way. And what I have found is my solution is what you need, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not empathy. Anytime you start a conversation with the word I, you are not being empathetic. You are not collaborating. It is pausing and listening to what's going on between the words. It is pausing and hearing what a client is not saying. It is taking the risk. When I do a proposal, I take a risk and I contact the client and I say, you know what, before I even share this proposal, I'll contact my number one stakeholder and say, let's work through this together. Let's solution on this. Let's make sure this says the way you want it to. Then I send it over to the team. I don't send proposals unless I have collaborated with the client on solutioning. Another thing that I suggest is 4 questions. And sometimes people challenge me and they go, I don't know. And I said, yes, the first question you ask the client is, and it begins with 4 F's. First, finest, future, and failure. What was it like, Scott, your first day back in the office after the pandemic? Or what was it like the first time you met with a client during a pandemic? Stop and understand what their first experience was and connect with them on what that was like. And it will teach you how things have changed. The second one is failure. Scott, what was your biggest failure that you've done since the pandemic? The third one is, what was your finest? What was the best thing that has happened since the pandemic? What was the opportunity that you've learned? And the final one that teaches you about collaboration is, what would the future look like? If I gave you a realistic magic wand, Scott, what would that look like? And then you take that information and you solution with the client. Forget about what you're selling. Solution with the client, or what that looks like.
I love the 4 F's right there. Hopefully Richard took notes and is jotting that down. That was
yeah, I actually teach a thing on the 4 F's for how I train, but it has nothing to do with those F's, but I like those better than mine. So
well, again, I'm about building relationships, connecting, and collaborating. So Scott, does that answer your question about where do I see collaboration and what collaboration is? It is about connecting with clients and really solutioning with them, and not having to be the expert, not having to come in and say, I'm the expert. And that's one of the things that the Harvard Business Review article talks about. Guys come in and we are driving, we are, guys come in and we have the answer. We are problem solvers. I'm going to fix this.
Yeah. As my wife keeps reminding me, don't try and solve the problem, just listen.
Yeah. And, even job descriptions are written that particular way. If you read job descriptions for sales, it always says looking for a problem solver, that kind of thing. The words that are used, they may be a bit outdated and going by the wayside now, and it's time for a refresh. I haven't written a job description in a really long time. I built my network to such a place that recruiting was made easy through LinkedIn, and I wouldn't even post jobs out there online. How do you see these different platforms, Cheryl, whether it's LinkedIn or Clubhouse or Twitter, all these different platforms and these different communities that are emerging? How do you see that as part of a salesperson's strategy moving forward in order to succeed? Is it a distraction? Is it noise? Is it mandatory? Like, you've got to be in there, you've got to participate. This is how you network. I'm curious how you think about this.
It's absolutely mandatory. And I write about this, and because I was basically invisible. So 2 years ago, when I came out of sales and I started coaching and training, I took a LinkedIn class, and out of 500 points, I scored 43 points. And they said, at this level, you were basically invisible.
Yeah.
And I think I had maybe 60 connections on LinkedIn. I had my head down. I've been selling for years. I didn't connect. Well, one of the things that I've learned is, if you are going to connect, if you are going to be if you're going to solution with people, you have to have resources. You have to have a network. Whether you need them today or whether you need them in 10 years, you also want to be a resource for people. You want to be a connection. And the thing that I want to give kudos to is things like LinkedIn. LinkedIn reached out to me and said, we realize that most of our sales thought leaders were not people of color. We haven't even thought about how do we expand this? And so a lot of people have been reaching out saying, how do we do this? How do we connect? And I know, Scott, you said, oh, when you hire, you never had to worry. You just went to LinkedIn. My challenge for you is what percentage of your network doesn't look like you?
Oh,
What percentage?
For me in particular, I don't know the exact numbers, but a significant large portion. And to your point,
good for you.
When I grew to a place where I could no longer do the hiring myself, I hired a Black woman from the LGBT community with blue hair and tattoos everywhere named Madison Butler, who has become a good friend and like little sister figure for me. So I purposely brought somebody in as the tip of the spear who doesn't look like me to bring in more, diversity into my sales and revenue organization.
Well, you said something was critical. You were intentional about it.
Yes.
How many sales managers, sales leaders have been intentional about it? And so one of the things I challenge everybody is I said, go to LinkedIn and connect with me. As soon as you connect with me, you are now connected to all of the sisters in sales that I am connected to, so is that when you are hiring, you are only a second connection away from everybody that I'm connected to. So connect with people that don't look like you, so is that you can build your connection. So yes, it is critical. So whether it's Twitter, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Clubhouse, I'm active on all of those, but it is critical. But you have to extend your network. You have to take the risk.
So what do you say, and I'll challenge you a little bit now since you challenged me. So what do you say when somebody says, okay, I want to be more active, but in order for me to pick that up, I've got to put something else down that I'm working on because I'm stretched thin and my bandwidth is not there. So I look at your profile and on LinkedIn, and you don't have very many connections, which tells me you're either extremely selective for your own reasons, or you haven't had time and energy yet to actively try to grow that platform and reach as many people as humanly possible. Like I have almost 60 times the amount of followers that you have on LinkedIn. So how do we get Cherilynn to have, that amount of connections on LinkedIn? Because I think this is a problem that a lot of people have. They're like, I don't have time to go to this event, to that, Clubhouse chat. I don't have time to connect with people. Who the heck do I connect with, right? I got 2 kids. They play sports all the time. Like it's getting harder and harder for me to be active, let alone other people. So feedback on that.
So, okay. And so to accept your challenge, like I said, a little less than 2 years ago, I had 60 connections. Today I have 1,700. So, so I've been growing at about 100 a month. It is, no, it's nowhere near where I need to be, but I've been intentional about it. But for years I didn't. You're right. I had 2 small children, and I was working, and I was a sales leader and a sales manager, and I didn't have time. But now,
how do you coach people to decide what to pick up? Because there's so many different options now. Like how do people who are up and coming cut through the noise and decide to say, okay, I'm going to create content, or I'm going to get involved with Sisters in Sales or other communities, or I'm going to actively commit to growing my network 100 people, a month? How do you decide which one to focus on? This is, and you're speaking here not to people like me or Richard, but to people who are, at the earlier stages of their career, or who have maybe made a career shift during the pandemic and are now in sales for the first time, and their network are not people in the functions that they're working in now.
So I can tell you what I've done. To be honest with you, I don't have all the answers. I will tell you what I have done. And what I have done is I have gone to lists. So when somebody puts out a list of top sales people that you should know, top sales books, top sales links you should know, I go through that and I send out and I say, hi, I'm Cherilynn. I'm Sisters in Sales, and I would love to hear your story. And I spend 15 minutes with them. I book 15 minutes and I ask them, Who else should I know? Who else should I talk to? Else should I connect with? I don't just connect with people just to connect. I want to know what their story is, how we can connect, how I can leverage them, how they can leverage me. And so that's how I have built my network. I don't know. Tell me your best tip for growing your LinkedIn profile, your LinkedIn connections.
Well, to be honest with you, I started this years ago, and it was strictly to make recruiting easier. That was why.
Okay.
It wasn't about, thought leadership or writing like cool posts or anything like that. I was just like, I had offices in 4 different parts of the country, and I had to hire hundreds of people. And I didn't want to pay, I worked at startups my whole career. So I don't want to pay for job postings. I don't want to manage job postings. I don't want to hire a staffing firm. I don't want to hire an internal recruiter yet. So for me, it was like, I'm going to connect with every single person who I might want to hire or who might hire me. That was my strategy.
Okay.
So it was all AEs and sales managers, and then it was all CEOs and founders. And I went and kind of did it in pockets. So it was like, okay, San Francisco, LA, Chicago, Austin, Miami, New York, Boston. And that's how I grew it in a very, intentional way. And over time, it developed into content creation and things like that. And the network size expanded, but it was very intentional about recruiting. And over the years, I've saved, I couldn't even tell you, at minimum, hundreds of thousands of dollars in recruiting, fees.
So
just from that.
So if you did it years ago, did you just look at your second and third level and just do connect?
Yeah, it was not. I was not interested in, even now, I don't need to have a full relationship with every single person from the start, because I don't know exactly who I'll be able to help or who might be able to help me. And so I was never scared of accepting, random requests from people or sending out a random request to somebody else. But when I did send, and if I am doing it now, if I do send a request out, I am more thoughtful about it now than I was back then. Back then, much more personal. I think I'm smarter and better at what I do, and I know the dynamics of the game,
Right.
how they're played now compared to how they were in 2015. So
okay. So if you were starting today, what would you do? You were starting out today, and you looked at your profile, and you had 60 connections, and you realized, wow. So then what would you do?
Yeah, 100 a month is not enough. Because if I'm you and you've been in business as long as you have, and you are as well spoken as you are, you have more content than just waiting, just sitting in your Google Drive probably. So you should be creating content online 3 to 4 times a week, at least on LinkedIn. You should probably have a cadence where you're reaching out to 25 to 50 new connections every single day, as just part of your routine, right? And you and I are not connected on LinkedIn, and you'll grow exponentially faster. So from 60 to 1,700 in 2 years is really, really slow. If I was working with you, we could have you over 10,000 by the end of the year, worst case scenario, if not sooner than that. And Richard, correct me if I'm wrong, you could work with Richard on it if you wanted to, work with neither of us if you want to. This happens all the time right now. And especially with somebody with your credentials and your knowledge base and what you can share. People need to hear from you. Right now, if you go on LinkedIn and create content, your audience is almost nobody. And that's a shame. And so I don't like to see people in that position when I think their voice should be heard. I go write a post and it's like selling out, I don't know what they call the Washington football team's old stadium anymore, but it used to be called RFK. It's like me going to the 50-yard line and RFK is filled every single time I write a post. That's an audience, that's power, and you can do something with that power, Cheryl.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the challenge. I'll accept the challenge, and we'll see where I am in 12 months.
I like that.
Awesome.
Go ahead,
We'll
Richard.
help you, by the way. We'll both be glad to support you and help you if you have questions.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to shift the conversation. I want to come back to what's happening in the world today, right? 2020 was, holy cow, nothing short of a shit show for lots and lots of reasons. But you and I've talked a little bit offline around like trying to have safe conversations, particularly around people with social justice, people of color, diversity, LGBTQ, like all these things. How do you define safe conversations, and how do you encourage the leadership to start to embrace that, right? Because it's not happening. So
Right.
I'm curious how you coach people to that.
Well, it's a good question, Richard. Thank you. So first thing that I do is I remind people about the article that Ben and Jerry's wrote. And Ben and Jerry said, silence is not an option. And that's where I start. And I remind people that if you are silent because you don't know what to say, if you are silent because you're afraid you may say the wrong thing, the message you're sending to your colleagues, your company, and their family and the community is that you don't care. And is that really the message you want to send? Is that you don't care? So I use an acronym for SAFE, and S stands for stance. You have to take a stance. You have to say, I have zero tolerance. You have to be like Scott. You have to be intentional and say, this is what I'm going to do. I have zero tolerance. We're going to hire people that don't look like us. We're going to promote people that don't look like us. I mean, you asked me what happens in sales. Well, what happens in sales is I train my sales manager over and over and over again and don't get promoted. I mean, I recall getting on the plane with 9 people who worked for my company, going out to pitch a $46 million deal. And we flew out to the Midwest. We go into this major health insurance company. There are 14 client stakeholders in the room. And I look around the room and 23 people, and not one of them looks like me. I'm at the head of the boardroom. I am leading this deal. The deal closes, and 4 other guys who worked on my team with me all got promoted. I didn't get promoted. And what they said to me was the president, who then promoted me immediately when he realized the mistake he had made after he had announced it, said, we just forgot, Cherilynn. We just didn't notice. And what I later learned is nobody was advocating for me in the room. So taking a stance means advocating for somebody in the room who maybe is not being advocated for. So take a stance, put them on the accounts, put them on the projects to give them the high visibility. You as a manager have to take a stance. A stands for appreciate. And the story I'm going to tell you may make some of your audience uncomfortable. So my husband and I, we have a Honda motorcycle, and one of my favorite date nights is on the back of the motorcycle. And I'm going to tell you, I look like a badass motorcycle chick when I'm riding the motorcycle. Okay, straight up, black leather boots, black pants, black and the yellow jacket with the pads and the shoulders. And we ride out to the edge of town, and we stop at this Target in the white section of town. I take my motorcycle helmet off. I've got helmet here, so I put on a black baseball cap, and I walk into Target. Okay. And I'm standing there looking at the kombucha, and a white guy walks up to me and says, do you work here? Now, Scott, what do people wear when they work in Target?
Don't they have like a little red vest and a white shirt or something like that?
Richard, do you know what every single employee in Target has?
They have a red polo shirt, if I remember correctly.
They have a red shirt, red shirt and khaki bottoms, and they have a Target logo. I am standing there in my motorcycle gear, and this man is in my face repeatedly. I asked you, do you work here? And I said to him, do you work here? Because I thought he was joking. And he got in my face again and said, I said, do you work here? And I turned and walked away. And I tell you this story because if you are not Black or brown, when you walk out of your house or out of your office, you have to appreciate that your experience is going to be different than mine. And so as a sales leader, as a sales manager, appreciate that there is a difference, okay? Appreciate that every single time I go into a high-end hotel and I'm walking down to breakfast in my suit, somebody's going to ask me to get them towels. And I always say, absolutely, towels are on the way. And I laugh as I go down and get on the elevator and hope they stand there naked all day waiting for the towels. Okay.
That's awesome.
So, but I laugh about it, but you have to appreciate that our experiences are going to be different. So S is take a stance. A is appreciate that what I'm experiencing is different than what you're experiencing. The F for safe stands for feelings. You have to allow yourself to be vulnerable. And if you don't remember what you were feeling when you saw George Floyd choked after laying there for 8 minutes with that cup on his knee, on his neck, then ask yourself, what would it have been like to watch your son, your brother, your husband, your cousin, your uncle die that way? And what would you have felt?
Yeah, I want to talk more about that. I once had a client, and I think it had to do more with what was happening in Ferguson. So this was a couple of years ago, Ferguson,
Mm-hmm.
Missouri, and there was one uh, young Black lady who was on the sales team, and I was doing one-on-ones with them, and it was that week, and I
Mm-hmm.
just looked at her and I said, how are you doing? She's like, well, I'm a little nervous, I'm a little upset. I said, has
Right.
anybody here even talked to you about it? And she said, well, they got a meeting together and they sort of talked about it on the floor. And I'm like, did anybody talk to you one-on-one? Like, just to, like, you have a different experience with this than any of
Right.
us, right? And she said, sadly, she said, no. She said, you're the first person to ask me. And so we ended up spending her one-on-one time just talking about that. So, which also tells me that, as yes, we need to take a stand. We're still super uncomfortable. We don't even know what to say. We don't know how to say it. I think Morgan Ingram, he said, don't ask how we're doing anymore. Just say, what can I do to help? Right?
Or
How.
just, okay. And if you don't, and if you don't want to ask how to help, E stands for empathy. Just be present with them. Just, you know what you did? You were present with her.
Right.
So many people, they just avoid. They're just like, okay, I'll
That's
just
what I
pretend like
mean.
it didn't happen. And so again, take a stance, appreciate, acknowledge your feelings. Say to somebody, gosh, I'm not sure how you're feeling, but when I think about it, if that was my son, I would be horrified. If that was my husband, I would just be so sad, because that's how every Black and brown person was feeling when they watched that. And the E stands for empathy, which is just being present. And that's exactly what you did, Richard. And kudos to you for doing that. So many people will not just be present in what happened. Just show up and just say, how are you? Just be present. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to have the answers. But just let them know, I don't tolerate it. I appreciate that what you're going through is different than mine. Here's how I'm feeling, and I'm going to be empathetic. I'm going to be present. I'm not going to give you the feel, felt, found. I'm not going to fix it. I'm just going to be present in how you're feeling.
That's great.
And
I appreciate that
and
advice.
and that's it. So that's what I encourage people to do. Is that is and I use the acronym for SAFE, because it is have safe conversations. And every time something happens, go into the office and have those safe conversations and be present with people.
That's great. That's really great. We're actually getting towards the end, so we kind of need to start to wrap up. But before we do that, we always, I actually didn't tell you this part is, what can we do for you? We're going to turn the sort of, although, you did a good job grilling Scott. I loved it.
Scott's very knowledgeable, and he accepted my challenge. So,
Yeah.
you know,
So obviously we absolutely want to support Sisters in Sales, 100%. Please go check them out. Please, make a stand, take a stand, which I really, one of the biggest things I got. But, what would you like to ask us? What would you want to ask us, if there's anything you could ask, or is there another cause that you're also, trying to promote? So we want to give you the mic for a couple of minutes.
so a couple things that I would do is, anybody who is listening to your podcast who either works for a company that would like to fill their pipeline with women of color, if you go to Sisters in Sales under sponsorship or partnership, you can download our partnership brochure. And in your welcome letter, you'll get an email from me with a link. I'd love to sit down and tell you about Sisters in Sales and some of the partnerships. So if you want some tips and ideas on how to fill your pipeline, how to attract, hire, and retain women of color, that's what I'm doing, is helping companies fill their pipeline, attract women, hire them, and retain them. So that's number one. Number two, if you have a Black or brown woman on your team, or you know anybody in sales, encourage them to check out Sisters in Sales, check out our events, and encourage them to help build a network that will help them retain and help you retain them, because they're building a community and have a place that they can develop and learn. And finally, I'm just going to give a pitch for my book, go to postpandemicselling.com. And you can read about my book. And if you're looking for tips and ideas on how to sell more empathetically, how to connect with your clients, and how to accept my challenges, and learn more tips like the 4 F's and what's in the cards and what the cards stand for, that's where you can find out about my book. It's also available on Amazon.
Cool. Well, awesome. Thank you, Cherilynn. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your time.
This has been awesome.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. And last shout out to our sponsors of Salesforce Revenue Cloud, Lead 411 and Gong.io. So thank you. And we will certainly see and talk to everybody next time.